Welcome to another episode of 10 Minutes With. Again, 2 weeks in a row. Kate is not here again. This time I actually know where she is this time. Last week, she claims that she was in training and that she was working on some kind of training course and she forgot what time it was.
Training? That sounds intense.
Yeah, I don't know. You never know with her. So she's like, oh, I lost track of time. I'm like, what are you, 10? Come on. So anyway, I'm making fun of her. She's not here. She's not here again. She should be back next week, but we'll see. So we want to go ahead and introduce our guests today. We've been trying to get them on for a while. Had them scheduled previously, had some illness pop up, but now we have them both here. We have the co-hosts of the Cardboard Boxseats Podcast. Please welcome Nick and Gabe.
Whoop whoop! What's going on, DJ Fluck?
Another day. I lost power right before we got started, so this episode may be very, very short. So we'll see. We'll see how far this goes. So jumping right into it. You guys obviously have a basketball-themed podcast. You've had quite a variety of guests that you've been able to bring on. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But first up, how'd you guys meet, and why'd you start a podcast together?
So I actually met Nick in college. We both went to Anderson University. It's a smaller private institution, college university, right outside of Clemson area. And Nick was 1 year ahead of me. And it's actually a funny story on how we met. We were in the same section of biology. We have a very similar degree with kind of like kinesiology and physiology and stuff like that. And we were in the same biology class. And I was like, oh, okay, this is like one of the other two guys in this class. Let me reach out to him, see what's going on. So we're walking to, of all places, the cadaver lab. And we're talking. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. This man, I could see myself hanging out with this guy. He seems pretty cool. So I don't see him ever again for the next semester. And I don't know, and I had no idea where he went. And Nick, take over from the story. Give us your perspective.
Yeah, so the teacher we had for that class was one of the hardest. And I found an opening in one of the easier teachers, one of the better liked teachers. So I jumped for it. And I abandoned Gabe after meeting him one day. I think he took it a little personal, but
I did, absolutely, because I said hello. We were chit-chatting on the way to the cadaver lab, and suddenly you disappear. Seems kind of interesting. And then the next semester we ended up having the same class together, and I think a couple classes went by, and Nick was like, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I do." And then from there, we just kind of hung out more and more consistently. We had a lot more classes together, and we really found our stride in our friendship, and it was really cool. But to answer your question about the podcast part, Nick, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so we in college kind of always joked around about starting a podcast because we had a common interest with basketball. Every Tuesday, Thursday, we'd actually play like 2 or 3 hours of 2K after classes. So we'd eat lunch, play 2K, and it would just go on almost every Tuesday, Thursday, all day. And we talked about how we just love basketball and thought about, we should start a podcast. And then 2 years later, after talking about it, we finally started the podcast. So it took us both graduating and moving away from each other to start a podcast.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the most interesting things about our podcast. We waited till we were both at probably one of the most busiest times in our lives, and in different cities, same state at least. But we do all of our interviews, and we had some audio issues and video issues in the beginning, but we found our stride when it comes to doing that long distance podcast relationship.
Yeah.
And that's basically the same thing. Kate and I, we worked in the same office together for 4.5 years, and we started this kind of little venture in the last 6 months before I packed up and went from Chicago to Phoenix. And then all of a sudden we're starting this. It's like we've recorded this is somewhere around episode 80 or so, and 2 of them we've been in the same room for out of the 80. So and it's great because with all the technology and everything out there, it makes it so easy to do nowadays. It's so much easier. But
absolutely,
yeah, for sure.
I can guarantee without a doubt that meeting on the way to the cadaver lab is never going to be topped in this show ever again. So I'm going to put that out there right now.
We'll try and top it next time we come on. We'll come up with a different story.
You set the bar very, very high already. So, so moving on, you've obviously went to school, you moved away from each other. use the podcast as a way to, obviously stay in touch. So what, can you describe the style of your show? What would a new listener, what would they hear when they listen for the first time?
So I'll take this one, Nick. We originally started off with just kind of blabbering our opinions and our predictions, our way too early predictions, which we're known for, notoriously known for, infamously known for, not famously. But after that, we just started reaching out to a lot of different people in the league. We tried to get a couple players. We shot for the stars, and we did find some stars in some of our guests for sure. But it wasn't the players that we found a real interest in. We found a real interest in kind of people behind the scenes, because the more we talked to people who are like sideline reporters or part of the medical staff or just announcers, we quickly found out that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than just 10 people playing on the court. So when listeners come to our show, expect us to have fun for sure. We're also known for our cold opens, where we typically make fun of something happening in the league. We got a couple cooking right now with this crazy trade that just happened with James Harden. So we got some ideas with that one, but then we'll move into kind of just talking about basketball. And then furthermore, what we like to do with our guests, we love to hear their life story and how they got there, like all the very, very fundamental stuff to how they became who they are, essentially. But then kind of that last 10 minutes, we switch it up and try to have fun with them. Not to say that their whole life isn't that fun. They have a lot of interesting stories for sure. But we really ask them silly off the wall questions like, I don't know, if you were Adam Silver for a day, what would you change? Or if all the mascots in the NBA were part of like a Hunger Games type scenario, who would come out on top? And that sparked a lot of interesting conversations like, what is a 76er? Is a Laker and a Clipper? Are we going with boats? Are we going with a razor and a barbershop, or a lake? So that's kind of what you'd expect. We don't really take it that serious. We're pretty informed. We like to have fun. What can we say?
On the mascot topic, I'm hoping the Phoenix Suns gorilla would made it pretty far into that.
Well, you know what? We think the Raptor is hard to beat. And if we're just going off of spunk, Benny the Bull has everyone beaten.
Have you guys ever heard the story of how the Phoenix Suns, how a gorilla became the mascot of the Phoenix?
No, tell us.
No, this is it was like back in the 1970s or so. The Suns were a relatively new franchise at that point, and they were trying to debate like, what are we going to have our mascot? Are we going to have it with like a giant sun with legs or something like that? Like they couldn't figure out a mascot. And just by coincidence, one day somebody had ordered like a singing telegram or something like that to be delivered to a Suns game. So this guy in a gorilla suit just so happens to show up to the game to deliver like a box of chocolates and flowers to somebody sitting in the front row. And the fans are like, oh, this guy's part of the game. This is part of the entertainment. And so the gorilla just started dancing and everybody got really into it. And then they brought the guy back over and over again. And it just stuck.
That's awesome.
And then they decided like, we got to, then this guy, he did it for a little while. And then they brought in the long time, he was more just kind of a dancer. And then they brought in a new guy and they said, okay, let's have some auditions. Let's see where we go with this. And this guy comes out and auditions and he goes and he like pulls out a trampoline and he leaps up and like climbs on the backboard and like, we have our guy. This is
You're hired.
So the origin of why the Phoenix Suns have a gorilla, well, one is that, and two is why is he always like jumping on trampolines and doing dunks and flips and everything? That's why too. Makes no sense.
That's our fun fact right there. Nick, write that down.
Yeah.
No sense at all, but hey, it's pretty awesome. And gotta grab my prop.
He's got the prop.
I got my prop. We got my very own Phoenix Suns gorilla bobblehead. Yeah, so.
And awesome. He's got his delivery box too, man.
Yeah, it was a charity event they did a few years back on their 50th anniversary of the team with the local food bank here. So he's got his box of food for the local food bank. So
man,
Yeah, so he's charitable as well. So
He's a gorilla of the people.
he is. The other thing too they were doing with him is they have like the Sun's gorilla, like you can rent him for parties and everything. And the one day they just had some time to kill, so they fired up a camera and they just started driving. Like they have the Sun's gorilla SUV that they travel around in.
Yeah.
And what they would do is they drive through these neighborhoods, and if they saw like a basketball hoop in somebody's driveway, they'd stop the car. Somebody would run up, put the trampoline in the driveway, and the girl would run up and like dunk in the basket.
That's so funny.
They grab the trampoline, run back to the car, and take off again. And they just like did this for several hours the one day. So it's
there was a really popular challenge. I don't know if it was on Twitter or Instagram, but it was the drive-by dunk, and people would just run out of their car, yam on a basket real quick, and run back in the car. And there's some. I'm sure the gorilla started that trend. The trendsetter.
I tried that once, but it only worked on the little kids' goals. It wouldn't work on the actual goals.
Did you actually make it though?
In the little kids' goals, yeah.
Okay, good. I was just making sure.
So there was our trademark deviation in topics. So we'll bring it back. So moving on. Obviously, you've been doing this for a while now. I'm sure you've learned something along the way. Share a piece of advice that you've learned since starting podcasting that you'd share to somebody who'd be starting their own podcast.
I feel like you always got to be. Oh, sorry, Gabe.
No, go ahead. You go first. I was just going to say, let's each do one.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like you always got to be evolving and like just constantly learning, because like when we started using, like, we were calling each other on the phone, and then we learned, okay, well, let's try Skype, let's try FaceTime, and then just working and reading stuff on Reddit, asking other podcasters for tips, and then just constantly learning as we're going. So I feel like if you think you have it good one way, there might always be a better way to get your information out there, or better audio software and stuff like that. So I don't know, just be always on the lookout for that, and always wanting to learn more about how to put a podcast out there. So.
Yeah, well, that was actually my idea, so I'm going to have to think of a new one now. This is actually a common theme that we have with each of our guests, too, and they bring this up because it's all about having a network. The importance of reaching out to people, stadium scene included, but you have to understand the importance of making connections with people, because that's going to open up doors in the process and later on in the future. Because I can't tell you how many guests we've gotten on our show because a former guest said, hey, he would be great. Oh, she would be great. Let me get y'all's contact information. And that's really how we keep up with all of our guests too. We really strive for that relationship over just like, okay, we used you for an hour. We really kind of, for lack of better words, invested our time in with our guests. And we just sent all of our guests like a Christmas card. We were just like, sure, whatever, let's do it. So we love to keep in contact, and sometimes we'll slide in the DMs like, hey, what do you think about this trade? Or hey, hope all is well. So I think, like Nick was saying, definitely evolve technology wise, but it's important to kind of stay consistent with relationship wise as well.
And then I'll throw in another one. And this, Josh Rodriguez, one of our first guests, actually gave us this. He said it helps to be consistent. So like if our day is Tuesday, so we put episodes out every other Tuesday. He said if that's your day, you need to stick with it, and then don't just fall off a couple times, even if you have COVID and get sick, myself included. But no, we didn't really follow that. But just try and be as consistent, so that way your listeners know when to listen and how to follow you.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Then we'll go ahead and go the bonus question here before we get into plugging your work. I just thought of this. So I mean, you've talked to quite a few people inside the NBA who've seen some things that the general public's not. What do you think is the craziest, hardest to believe story you've been told? Is that's your favorite as far as your guests have shared with you?
I have one off the top of my head. Nick, do you have one?
I have one. You go first.
Okay, I'll go first. This actually happened overseas when one of our players, Farrakhan Hall, he plays for the Windy City Bulls. He was playing overseas at one point. I can't remember the team. I think it was either like Croatia or Georgia. And he was right out of college, and he said, "Oh man, this is going to be interesting." Okay, kind of that inner Europe type feel, very different atmosphere than some of those coastal countries. So he gets there, he gets in the car and they're driving 2 hours to the stadium for practice. And it's through it's like a 1.5 lane road, the way he described it, I'm pretty sure. And there's trees like right on the edge, and the guy's just swerving around. And the taxi driver, he doesn't speak a lick of English. And Farrakhan Hall is just in the back, just praying, because he already hates driving. So let's just combine that with obstacles right by you and just going at 80, 90 miles an hour. So he finally gets there. He gets on the ground. I'm sure he kissed the ground. It's like, land ho, I want it. And he gets there and everyone's crying. He's like, oh, what the heck? What's going on? So he asks one of his teammates, and the teammate says, oh yeah, 3 or 4 of our players were coming from the airport and they were going really, really fast on that road, and they all got in a car crash and died.
Oh.
And he told that story, and he immediately went into that. And I was like, oh, I went from laughing to like, is this okay to laugh at? I don't think it is. I'm sure it's not.
Oh.
So he goes on to say that he was considered like a curse or a boon on the team because like he showed up, but the other 3 didn't. But I mean, he had a great career, and he's now playing with the Windy City Bulls, the G League for Chicago. And he's great. I love looking at his stories. He's so inspirational.
Yeah. All right, mine. We interviewed Marco Nunez, and he used to be the athletic trainer for the Bulls, for the Lakers. Sorry, and he was telling us a story about how Kobe was on the team and Phil Jackson was the coach. And if you watch The Last Dance, you kind of understand that Phil liked meditation before games. And Kobe wanted to be iced before the game. So Marco went in there, and this is right when Phil was starting the meditation. And Kobe's like, you need to ice me now. And he's like, no, like Phil's going to find me if I ice you. And Kobe's like, now. So he had to choose between Phil Jackson and Kobe Bryant. And he chose Kobe. And then after that, he was walking in the hall, and he passed Phil, and Phil's like, I'm finding you.
No.
Yeah. And then Kobe went up to him later, and Mark was like, dude, you got me fined. Like, what the heck? And Kobe's like, don't worry. I'll pay the fine and everything like that.
He was good for it.
Yeah, that's funny.
Oh, wow.
We have a surprising amount of Kobe stories. We've interviewed a lot of people on the Lakers, and just some of the stories. So we interviewed Andrew Bernstein. He's the official photographer for the Lakers, actually the Spectrum Center. And he was just telling, because he'd been there for generations. He'd been there with like Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, even kind of this current generation with LeBron James. So if you're a Laker fan, you need to check out some of these episodes that we have with Marco Nunez, the former athletic trainer, Andrew Bernstein, the photographer, Max Hooper, he's one of the Laker associate coaches. You have to check those out.
It's just so wild, and it never ceases to amaze me when you have on somebody who's worked with famous people or whatever, and they just they're just like casually name dropping. Oh yeah, I had to go do this for Kobe Bryant, or I had to, Phil Jackson find me.
Yeah. Well, that's what we ask them too.
I'm like,
we ask them and we say, hey, like, do you guys fangirl in front of these like famous coaches and players and like former players and stuff like that? And we had Chris Denari, he's the play-by-play announcer for the Indiana Pacers. And he gets on, for a very long time. He's great at what he does. And he got on the elevator with Larry Bird, and he was like, oh man, that is Larry Bird. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. But even more so, he got on the same elevator with Darius Rucker, and he's like, oh my gosh, it's Darius Rucker.
I grew up in Indiana, so before I moved out of there, there were quite a few Pacers games that I saw him call. He's been around the Indianapolis sports scene for a very, very long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's funny. The first time I went to a Pacers game when Larry Bird was in the front office, and you're looking around, all of a sudden you see this gigantic 6'10" guy kind of walk in the room. It's like, oh, hey, there's Larry Bird. He sticks out like a
There he is.
One of my best friends, actually, he lived in Indianapolis, and he was walking home from work the one day, and just like Larry Bird just like walks right past him on the street, and he's just
dang.
Yeah.
Wow, I never realized he was that tall.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't realize how tall 6'10" is until you're standing next to it. Because I met David Robinson one time when we were up at the Naval Academy, and he's a giant. Because it was like It's like out of the screen tall.
Or even players that like aren't like don't seem that tall. Like we met JJ Redick, and like he's like an average basketball player, but like we took a picture with him, and it's still like,
I'm to his chest. It's like,
It's, and then in the Suns arena, they share it with the Phoenix Mercury, and they have these like wall cutouts of like real size players. And so I have a photo of me, doing the like standing up in front of Brittany Griner, who also a very tall individual. She's like 6'8", 6'9", something like that. And I'm just like, wow, that's just, you don't
realize it.
Grasp it until you're standing right there next.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So we've deviated quite enough. Let's circle back. And where can we find your show? Where can we find your social media?
So you can find our show anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're on Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Pandora. Yeah, we overhauled everything, so we should be out there wherever you look. When you do search for us, it's Cardboard Box Seats, and those box seats, it's not 2 words, it's 1 word. So that's the important part. And then on social media, we're pretty active on Instagram, but we both have lives. We're busy. It's at CBBS Podcast, and feel free to slide in our DMs, say that you like the show. We'll send you a sticker, a t-shirt. Just let us know.
Yeah.
Leave reviews, and we'll also have all that information in the down below in the description of this video and in the podcast. So it's right there for you to click on. No excuse not to follow.
Yeah, no excuse now.
Go do it.
Do it.
So Nick, Gabe, thank you very much. It's just very entertaining stories. I love the guest collection you pulled on. Keep it going. Really enjoy seeing your work. And come on back anytime.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having us.
We got plenty more stories. You just open the door.
Yeah, well, we're actually haven't formally announced this, and I haven't told Kate yet, but we're going to start doing more. A few years ago, we started doing these roundtables. Like we did one for the World Cup, and we did one for like women in sports, and they actually rated extremely well. We get like 5 or 6 people on that kind of specialize in the topic. It's like, I think we need to bring that back. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to have an NBA roundtable coming up here soon. I don't know when, but we will get that on the schedule. And the 2 of you are invited.
Oh wow!
I appreciate it.
Get like matching jackets too. Is it invite only? Yes.
You'll have to pay from yourself. I don't have any money in the budget for that this year.
No,
that's okay. We'll do what we can.
We'll wear our t-shirts.
Get a patch or something, commemorative patch or lapel pin.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. So the show again, Cardboard Box Seats, and that's box seats with no space in between. And then for us, be sure to check us out at stadiumscene.tv. Give us a follow on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest at Stadium Scene, at Stadium_Scene on Instagram. I posted our first TikTok today at Stadium Scene. So, yeah, we're really branching out there with the youngins. So check that out. Give us a follow. And hopefully Kate will be back next week. She's got 2 strikes already, and we're only halfway through January.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah, not good. So otherwise, we'll see you next week.